Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here. Tonight, there's nothing you need to focus on, nothing you need to remember, and nowhere you need to go. This is a gentle, unhurried journey through the story of the Great Pyramids of Giza, told slowly and softly, with calm words and quiet moments. You can listen closely if you'd like, or simply let the words pass by as you relax, unwind, or drift peacefully into sleep. Make yourself comfortable, and when you're ready, we'll begin. As you settle into this quiet journey through time, let us begin where the desert meets the sky, and where the ancient world still whispers its secrets to those who listen closely. The Pyramids of Giza rest upon the west bank of the Nile River, their massive forms silhouetted against the endless Egyptian sky. If you were to stand there today, you would feel the same sun that warmed the faces of the builders thousands of years ago. The placement of these monuments was no accident. Every stone, every angle, every choice was made with profound intention. In the minds and hearts of ancient Egyptians, the West held deep spiritual significance. It was the direction of the setting sun, where Ra, the sun god, descended each evening into the realm of darkness. The West became synonymous with death itself, but not death as an ending, rather, death as a transformation, a journey into another realm. To build a tomb on the western bank was to align the deceased with this eternal cycle, to ensure their soul could follow the sun into the afterlife and be reborn with it each dawn. The land itself seems to have been chosen by the gods. The Giza Plateau rises naturally from the surrounding floodplain, a gift of geology that served a sacred purpose. Each year, the Nile would swell with the waters of distant mountains, spreading life-giving silt across the valley. But here, on this elevated limestone shelf, the monuments stood safe and eternal, untouched by the annual inundation that renewed the farmlands below. The ancients understood their landscape intimately, and they built for eternity. These three magnificent structures, the pyramids that have captured human imagination for millennia, were all raised during a single remarkable period of Egyptian history. The Fourth Dynasty, a time of unprecedented ambition and architectural mastery, saw the construction of these timeless monuments. This was an era when Egypt's power was at its height, when resources flowed into the royal treasury, and when the organization of human labor reached levels that still astound us today. The pyramids were built to honor three pharaohs, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure. Each of these kings commanded the construction of his own eternal resting place, each pyramid a statement of divine kingship, each one a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. These were not merely tombs, but vessels for transformation, architectural prayers carved in stone. The largest of the three, the Great Pyramid, was created for Pharaoh Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops. This single structure would become the most famous monument in human history, a wonder that has outlasted empires and witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Khufu's vision was translated into stone by thousands of workers, a project that would define his reign and echo through eternity. The construction of the Great Pyramid began around 2600 BCE, a time so distant that it lies beyond the reach of most historical imagination. To put this in perspective, the Great Pyramid was already ancient when Cleopatra walked the earth. More time separates Cleopatra from us than separated her from the pyramid builders. This monument has stood for more than 4,500 years, watching silently as humanity evolved, as languages were born and died, as entire ways of life rose from nothing and returned to dust. But the pyramids did not stand alone in splendid isolation. They were the centerpieces of something far more elaborate, a carefully planned royal necropolis, a city of the dead designed with the same precision as any city of the living. Every element was positioned according to sacred geometry and religious belief. The necropolis was a landscape of meaning, where every building, every pathway, every open space held significance. This vast complex included valley temples where rituals began, mortuary temples where offerings were made to sustain the pharaoh's spirit in the afterlife, and causeways, long, covered corridors that connected the temples to the pyramids themselves. There were subsidiary pyramids, smaller structures that housed queens and royal family members, ensuring that the pharaoh would be surrounded by his loved ones even in death. Mastaba tombs of nobles and officials spread out around the royal pyramids, for proximity to the divine king in death was considered a great honor, a way to share in his eternal glory. And there, keeping eternal watch over this sacred landscape, stands the Great Sphinx. This colossal sculpture, with the body of a lion and the head of a human, gazes steadily toward the eastern horizon, toward the rising sun. Most scholars believe the face represents Pharaoh Khafra, whose pyramid rises behind it. The Sphinx embodies the pharaoh's divine power, part human, part beast, part god, a guardian positioned at the threshold between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. As the night deepens around you, imagine this scene as it once was, white limestone gleaming in the moonlight, gilded capstones catching the first rays of dawn, priests moving in quiet procession along the causeways, the scent of incense drifting on the desert wind. The pyramids were never the silent, weathered monuments we see today. They were active places of worship, brilliant and purposeful, the focus of a civilization's deepest beliefs about life, death, and what lies beyond. Rest now, and let these images settle gently in your mind. The ancient stones remain, patient and eternal, holding their secrets as the stars will slowly overhead. Let us now turn our attention to the monument itself, to the sheer presence of the Great Pyramid, and to numbers that challenge the mind to comprehend what human hands have accomplished. When it was first completed, the Great Pyramid rose majestically to a height of about 481 feet, 147 meters, into the Egyptian sky. Imagine standing at its base, letting your gaze travel upward along those smooth, gleaming slopes, climbing higher and higher until your eyes reached the summit, so far above that it seemed to pierce the heavens themselves. This was a mountain made by human will, a sacred geometry rendered in stone, reaching upward as if to touch the realm of the gods. At its very apex sat the pyramid Ion, the capstone that completed the structure. This final piece, this crown of the pyramid, may have been covered in gold or electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver that would have blazed like a second sun in the desert light. Each morning, as Ra began his journey across the sky, this golden peak would have caught the first rays of dawn, announcing the eternal presence of the divine king to all who looked upon it. As the day progressed, this brilliant point of light would have been visible for miles across the valley, a beacon of royal and divine power. For nearly 3,800 years, this single structure held a distinction that speaks to the ambition and capability of its builders. The Great Pyramid was the tallest structure ever built by human hands. Let that settle in your mind for a moment. For millennia upon millennia, nothing surpassed it. Empires rose and fell, new civilizations emerged, technologies advanced, and still the Great Pyramid stood taller than anything humanity could create. Not until the Middle Ages would humans finally build higher, and even then, the pyramid's record remained an achievement unmatched in its time. Today, after thousands of years of weathering, after the removal of its outer casing stones, after the slow work of wind and sand and time, the pyramid stands at about 450 feet, 137 meters, tall. It has lost approximately 30 feet of its original height, the gleaming white limestone casing stones carried away over centuries to build the mosques and buildings of Cairo. But even diminished, even stripped of its original magnificence, it remains an overwhelming presence, a testimony to human determination. The base of this colossal structure tells its own story of precision and scale. Each side of the square base measures roughly 755 feet, 230 meters, in length. To walk the perimeter of the pyramid is to travel more than half a mile, tracing the boundary of a monument so large it defies casual understanding. And remarkably, despite the enormous scale, the four sides are aligned with extraordinary accuracy to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an error of only a fraction of a single degree. This base covers more than 13 acres of desert plateau, 13 acres of foundation, 13 acres of perfectly leveled bedrock, 13 acres upon which an artificial mountain would rise. To visualize this, imagine 10 American football fields laid side by side. That is the footprint of this single monument. Within this space, entire buildings could be swallowed up and lost, made invisible by the sheer mass of stone above them. The pyramid contains an estimated 2 to 2.5 million individual stone blocks. Let your mind rest on that number for a moment. 2 million stones. 2.5 million pieces, each one cut, shaped, transported, and set into place with care and precision. If you tried to count them, giving each stone just 1 second of your attention, it would take you more than a month of continuous counting, day and night without rest, to number them all. And each one represents human labor, human ingenuity, human sweat under the ancient sun. Most of these blocks weigh between 2 and 3 tons each. A ton is roughly the weight of a small car, so imagine blocks weighing as much as 2 or 3 automobiles, stacked one upon another, rising higher and higher into the sky. The logistics of moving such weight, of lifting it, of positioning it exactly where it needed to be, presents challenges that still inspire debate among engineers and archaeologists today. But the truly massive stones lie deeper within the structure, hidden in the interior chambers and passages. Some of the granite blocks used in the king's chamber and the relieving chambers above it weigh over 80 tons. 80 tons, the weight of several dozen modern cars, the weight of a military tank, carved from living rock at quarries in Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south, then transported north along the Nile, then moved to the pyramid, then lifted into position high within the structure. How this was accomplished remains one of the great questions of archaeology, a puzzle that connects us across time to the brilliant minds who solved problems we are still working to understand. The total weight of the entire structure approaches 6 million tons. 6 million tons of limestone and granite, pressed down upon the bedrock of the Giza Plateau. This is a weight almost impossible to grasp. It is heavier than all the water in a large lake, heavier than thousands of the largest ships ever built, a concentration of mass that represents not just stone, but collective human effort on a scale rarely seen in history. As you rest in this moment, let yourself feel the magnitude of what was achieved. Let the numbers wash over you not as cold statistics, but as echoes of countless individual acts, hands gripping rope, shoulders pushing against stone, voices calling out measurements, the ring of copper tools against rock, the creak of wooden sledges, the splash of water that smoothed the path. Behind these immense numbers are human stories, human lives dedicated to creating something that would endure long after their names were forgotten. The pyramid stands tonight as it has stood for thousands of years, patient and massive, holding within its bulk the combined labor of generations. Rest now in the shadow of this achievement, and let the weight of time press gently upon your awareness, heavy and comforting as ancient stone. As we move deeper into the quiet night, let us consider something truly remarkable about the Great Pyramid, not merely its size, but the extraordinary precision with which it was conceived and executed. The pyramid's base was designed according to a very specific measurement, 440 royal cubits per side. This was not an arbitrary number, not a rough approximation, but a deliberate and exact specification. The ancient Egyptians worked within a system of measurement that was both practical and sacred, a system that connected human scale to divine proportion. Every dimension of the pyramid was calculated, planned, and executed according to these sacred units. The royal cubit, the fundamental unit of measurement used in the pyramid's construction, measured about 52.3 centimeters, roughly 20.6 inches in length. This unit was based on the length of a forearm from elbow to the tip of the middle finger, then standardized and subdivided into smaller units, palms and digits. Master builders carried cubit rods, carefully calibrated measuring sticks that ensured consistency across the entire project. These weren't casual estimates scratched in sand, but precise instruments that allowed thousands of workers, laboring over decades, to coordinate their efforts to within fractions of an inch. Perhaps the most astonishing demonstration of the builder's skill lies in the orientation of the structure itself. The four sides of the pyramid are aligned to true north, south, east, and west with breathtaking accuracy. This was not magnetic north, which shifts over time, but true north, the direction of Earth's axis of rotation. To achieve this without modern instruments, without compasses or satellites or GPS, the ancient architects likely used the stars, observing the movements of celestial bodies with the patience of astronomers and the precision of mathematicians. Night after night, they would have watched the heavens, calculating and recalculating, ensuring that their monument would stand in perfect harmony with the cosmos. The result of their efforts is almost beyond belief. The average error in alignment across all four sides is just a few centimeters, mere inches across a base that stretches more than 750 feet in each direction. Imagine drawing a straight line more than 2 football fields long and being off by less than the width of your hand. This is precision that speaks not of primitive builders fumbling with crude tools, but of master craftsmen applying sophisticated understanding to an immense challenge. The slope of the pyramid's sides was determined by a measurement system called the sept, which described the relationship between the horizontal run and the vertical rise. The Great Pyramid was designed with a sept of 5.5 palms. This means that for every cubit the pyramid rose vertically, the face would move inward by 5.5 palms horizontally. This ratio was carefully chosen and meticulously maintained across millions of blocks and hundreds of vertical feet. This sept of 5.5 palms creates a slope angle of approximately 51 degrees, 50 minutes, and 40 seconds. It's a specific, elegant angle, not too steep, not too shallow, but perfectly balanced. This angle gives the pyramid its characteristic profile, that distinctive shape that has become synonymous with ancient Egypt itself. The slope is steep enough to inspire awe, to draw the eye upward toward the heavens, yet stable enough to stand for millennia. There is something even more intriguing hidden within these proportions, something that has fascinated mathematicians and mystery seekers for generations. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height closely approximates 2 pi, twice pi, that fundamental mathematical constant that describes the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. Whether this was intentional, whether the ancient builders understood this mathematical relationship, or whether it emerged naturally from their system of proportions based on the sept, remains a subject of gentle debate. But the relationship is there, encoded in stone, connecting this ancient monument to the fundamental mathematics that govern our universe. As the pyramid rises from its enormous base toward the sky, another subtle refinement becomes apparent to those who study it closely. The block sizes decrease gradually as you climb higher. The massive foundation blocks give way to progressively smaller stones as the structure ascends. This wasn't laziness or convenience, but sophisticated engineering. The larger, heavier blocks at the bottom provide a stable foundation, capable of bearing the immense weight above. As the structure narrows toward the top, smaller blocks become more practical to lift and maneuver, while still maintaining the structural integrity of the whole. The builders understood load distribution, understood how forces would flow through their creation, and adjusted their methods accordingly. At each of the pyramid's four corners, where two enormous faces meet, the angles form nearly perfect right angles, 90 degrees within tolerances that would satisfy a modern engineer. Think of trying to achieve this with millions of individual stones, laid by thousands of hands over many years. Each block had to be cut and placed so that, collectively, they would create these perfect geometric relationships. The accumulation of tiny errors could have thrown everything off, yet somehow, through careful planning and constant checking, the builders maintained precision that still astounds us. In fact, when 19th-century surveyors arrived in Egypt with the finest instruments of the Industrial Revolution, theodolites, measuring chains, and all the tools of Victorian engineering, they were shocked to discover that the ancient pyramid matched or exceeded the accuracy of their own work. These were men from a society that prided itself on scientific precision, on mathematical rigor, on technological advancement, and yet here was a monument built thousands of years before their time that could stand comparison with their best efforts. Some measurements of the Great Pyramid taken by these Victorian engineers remained the standard for decades, because the pyramid itself served as a reliable reference point, more accurate than many of the surveying benchmarks of the 19th century. This precision speaks to us across the millennia. It tells us that the people who built the pyramids were not primitive laborers engaged in brute force construction. They were mathematicians and astronomers, engineers and artists, working with tools we might consider simple but applying them with a sophistication and care that created something timeless. They understood geometry not just theoretically, but practically. They could translate abstract mathematical concepts into massive physical reality, and they could maintain that precision across a project of unprecedented scale. As you drift toward sleep, let yourself marvel at this achievement. Let the precision of ancient hands, the careful measurements repeated 10,000 times, the patient alignment with the stars, settle into your thoughts like stones carefully placed, one upon another, building something that will outlast us all. The pyramid stands not through accident, but through intention, every angle calculated, every dimension deliberate, every stone positioned with care that borders on reverence. Rest now, and let the quiet perfection of ancient mathematics carry you gently into dreams. As the night deepens and your breathing slows, let us step inside the Great Pyramid, into spaces that have been sealed in darkness for thousands of years, where silence is absolute and the weight of millions of tons of stone presses down from above. The pyramid's original entrance lies high on its north face, positioned about 55 feet above ground level. This placement was intentional, chosen for reasons both practical and symbolic. The north held special significance in Egyptian cosmology. It was the direction of the circumpolar stars, those eternal lights that never set below the horizon, symbols of immortality and the imperishable nature of the pharaoh's spirit. To enter the pyramid from the north was to begin a journey aligned with the eternal stars, to step from the world of the living into a passage designed for the soul's transformation. From this entrance, a narrow descending passage slopes downward at a precise angle, cutting through the pyramid's masonry and then boring deep into the living bedrock beneath. The passage is just over 3 feet wide and about 4 feet high, not meant for comfortable walking, but for crawling or crouching, moving slowly into the earth. The walls are smooth, the angle constant, as this corridor plunges downward into darkness. To move through it is to feel the mountain of stone above you, to sense the immense weight held back by geometry and careful engineering. This descending passage leads deep beneath the pyramid's base to an unfinished subterranean chamber, carved roughly from the bedrock nearly 100 feet below the surface. The chamber is raw, its walls showing tool marks where workers cut into the stone, its floor uneven, its purpose mysterious. Some scholars believe this was the original burial chamber, later abandoned when the pharaoh's plans changed. Others suggest it held symbolic meaning, representing the underworld, the deepest realm of the afterlife. Whatever its purpose, it was left incomplete, a rough-hewn space in contrast to the precision of everything above it, a secret hollow in the darkness beneath millions of tons of limestone. But the descending passage holds another secret. Partway down its length, concealed behind blocks that once made it invisible, a second corridor branches upward. This is the ascending passage, climbing at the same angle as the descending corridor but in the opposite direction, rising up into the heart of the pyramid. This passage was sealed in antiquity, its entrance plugged with massive granite blocks that fit so precisely they became nearly invisible, protecting the chambers above from those who might seek to intrude upon the pharaoh's eternal rest. The ascending passage is even more confined than its descending counterpart, a narrow tunnel through solid stone that climbs upward toward the pyramid's core. To move through it is to feel compressed, enclosed, aware that you are deep within an artificial mountain. But then, suddenly, dramatically, the passage opens. It opens into the Grand Gallery, one of the most remarkable architectural spaces created in the ancient world. After the confinement of the narrow passages, the Grand Gallery must have seemed almost impossible, a corridor that rises over 8 meters high, roughly 26 feet from floor to ceiling. The walls rise in corbelled steps, each course of stone jutting slightly inward as they climb, creating a soaring space that draws the eye upward. The gallery continues upward at the same steep angle as the ascending passage, but now there is space, there is air, there is a sense of grandeur that matches the pyramid's exterior. The Grand Gallery is nearly 50 meters long, about 160 feet, a stone corridor climbing toward the pyramid's heart. Its polished limestone walls would have gleamed in torchlight during the funeral procession, reflecting flames as priests carried the pharaoh's body upward, ascending toward his final resting place. The acoustics of the space are extraordinary, even a whisper echoes and resonates, as if the pyramid itself is speaking. At the top of the Grand Gallery, through a low antechamber designed with portcullis stones that could be lowered to seal the space beyond, lies the king's chamber. This is the culmination of the journey inward, the sacred heart of the entire structure. Unlike the limestone passages and galleries, the king's chamber is built entirely of red granite, stone brought from quarries near Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south. The granite gives the chamber a different presence, darker, heavier, more solemn than the pale limestone that forms most of the pyramid. The king's chamber measures about 10 by 20 by 11 feet high, not vast, but perfectly proportioned. The walls are smooth, polished, fitted together with such precision that you cannot slip a blade between the stones. The floor is level, the ceiling flat, and everything speaks of completion, of finality, of a space made ready for eternity. And there, along the western wall of the chamber, sits the massive granite sarcophagus. It still rests in the position where it was placed more than 4,500 years ago, carved from a single block of red granite, its interior carefully hollowed out to receive the pharaoh's coffin. The sarcophagus is so large that it could not have fit through the passages leading to the chamber. It must have been placed during construction, the pyramid built around it. When it was discovered in ancient times, the lid was already gone, the interior empty. What became of Khufu's mummy, whether it was stolen in antiquity or removed for some other reason, remains unknown. But the sarcophagus remains, a silent witness, waiting in the darkness. Above the king's chamber, invisible to anyone standing within it, lie 5 additional chambers, stacked one atop the other like the layers of a protective shield. These are called the relieving chambers, though they were never meant to be entered, never meant to be seen. They exist solely to protect the ceiling of the king's chamber from the crushing weight of the pyramid above. Each relieving chamber creates an air space that helps distribute the immense load of stone, more than 2 million tons pressing down from above. The chambers are constructed with massive granite beams forming their floors and ceilings, some of these beams weighing more than 80 tons each. The topmost chamber has a pointed roof, like a gable, designed to deflect the forces outward and downward, away from the vulnerable flat ceiling of the king's chamber below. The builders understood that stone, for all its strength, is also brittle. A flat ceiling can crack under sustained pressure, can fracture and fail. So they created these hidden spaces, these layers of protection, ensuring that even under the weight of a mountain, the king's chamber would remain intact. And it has, for more than 4 millennia, the ceiling has held, the walls have stood firm, the chamber has endured exactly as its builders intended. When explorers first discovered these relieving chambers in the 19th century, forcing their way through small openings with crude tools and burning torches in the stale air, they found something unexpected. On the walls, hidden in darkness since the pyramid was sealed, were marks made by the construction crews, names of work gangs written in red ochre, hieratic graffiti that included references to Khufu himself. These marks, never meant to be seen by human eyes again, are some of the clearest evidence we have that the Great Pyramid was indeed built for Pharaoh Khufu. They're also deeply human touches, workers leaving their names in spaces that would be sealed forever, a desire to be remembered that echoes across the centuries. As you rest now, imagine these hidden chambers, these secret spaces nested within the stone mountain. Imagine the darkness there, absolute and unchanging, the silence perfect, the air still for thousands of years. The pyramid holds its secrets close, reveals them slowly, chamber by chamber, passage by passage, each space a word in a story written in stone, a story of belief so strong it could move mountains. Let yourself drift now, cradled by the weight of stone above, protected by the careful engineering of ancient hands, safe in the knowledge that some things, once built with care and precision and purpose, can endure beyond imagining. As the night settles more deeply around you, let us turn our thoughts to one of history's greatest questions, a question that has puzzled minds for thousands of years. How was it built? How did ancient hands, working with tools we might consider simple, create something so monumental, so precise, so enduring? The answer begins in the earth itself, in the quarries where the pyramid's substance was born. Most of the limestone blocks that form the pyramid's massive core came from quarries located near Giza itself, just south and east of the pyramid complex. This was practical wisdom. Why transport millions of tons of stone across great distances when suitable material lay close at hand? The Giza Plateau itself is limestone, the accumulated remains of ancient seabeds, compressed and hardened over millions of years. Workers cut directly into this living rock, separating blocks with copper tools and stone pounders, following natural seams in the stone where possible, creating artificial breaks where necessary. The work was methodical, patient. Copper chisels would be driven into the limestone, wooden wedges inserted into cracks and soaked with water. As the wood expanded, it would slowly, inexorably split the stone along predetermined lines. Each block would be roughly shaped at the quarry before transport, reducing unnecessary weight, making the journey to the pyramid slightly easier. The quarries themselves still bear the scars of this work, negative spaces where blocks once existed, step-like formations where level after level of stone was removed, openings in the earth that mirror the rising courses of the pyramid itself. But not all the pyramid's stone came from nearby. The fine white casing stones that once covered the entire structure, giving it its smooth, gleaming appearance, came from Tura, a quarry site across the Nile River. This limestone was of superior quality, finer grained, whiter, more lustrous than the rough blocks of the core. The Tura stone could be polished to a brilliant sheen, could be cut with extraordinary precision, could reflect sunlight with an intensity that made the pyramid visible for miles. These casing stones had to be transported across the Nile, loaded onto boats during the annual inundation when the river swelled and reached closer to the quarry sites. Imagine the flotillas of vessels moving across the water, heavy with stone, sails catching the wind, oars pulling rhythmically as the precious cargo made its journey from east to west, from the land of the living to the land of the dead. And then there was granite, that harder, more difficult stone, dark red and crystalline, used in the king's chamber and the internal structures that bore the greatest weight. This granite came from Aswan, over 900 kilometers away to the south, more than 560 miles up the Nile. The journey from Aswan to Giza would have taken weeks, even with favorable winds and currents. Teams of workers at the granite quarries would use balls of dolerite, an even harder stone, to pound and shape the granite, a process that required tremendous effort and time. Once cut, these massive blocks, some weighing many tons, would be loaded onto specialized boats, reinforced vessels capable of bearing such weight, and then transported north along the great river that was Egypt's lifeline. Once at Giza, whether from nearby quarries or distant Aswan, the stones faced their next challenge: movement across land. The primary method was elegant in its simplicity: wooden sledges. Large blocks of stone would be secured to sledges made of sturdy timber, and teams of workers would haul them using ropes, dozens or even hundreds of people pulling in coordinated rhythm, moving the stone inch by inch, foot by foot, across the desert surface. But hauling such weight creates tremendous friction. The sledge would dig into sand, would resist movement, would exhaust the workers quickly. The ancient Egyptians discovered an ingenious solution, and we know of it because they depicted it in their tomb paintings. Water, or sometimes wet clay, would be poured onto the sand in front of the sledge runners. This moisture would cause the sand grains to bind together slightly, creating a firmer, slicker surface. Modern experiments have confirmed this ancient wisdom. Wetting the sand ahead of a sledge can reduce the force needed to pull it by nearly half. What appeared at first glance to be simple manual labor was actually the application of sophisticated understanding of materials and friction. To move the stones from ground level up to the pyramid's rising courses, ramps were essential. These ramps were made of mud, brick and rubble, temporary structures built specifically for the construction project, then dismantled once they were no longer needed. The ramps would have been substantial constructions in their own right, engineered to bear the weight of stones, and the teams of workers hauling them, maintained constantly as they were used and reused day after day, month after month, year after year. Wooden levers played a crucial role as well, particularly in the final positioning of blocks. Once a stone reached its designated course, workers would use wooden beams as levers, inserting them beneath the block, prying and lifting, gaining inches of height, then placing packing stones or wooden spacers underneath, then prying again, working patiently until the block could be shifted into its final position. Other workers would use wooden rockers, curved pieces of wood that allowed blocks to be tilted and warped into place with careful, controlled movements. These techniques, born of necessity and refined through practice, allowed precise positioning even at great heights. For the lower levels of the pyramid, straight ramps were the most practical approach. A long, gradual incline could be built leading up to the working surface, and teams could haul stones up this steady slope. The ramp would need to have a gentle enough grade that workers could actually move the heavy loads. Too steep and the task becomes impossible, no matter how many people pull. As the pyramid grew taller, these straight ramps would need to grow longer to maintain a workable slope, eventually extending far out into the desert. But at some point, as the pyramid rose higher and higher, straight ramps would become impractical. A ramp reaching to the upper courses while maintaining a reasonable slope would need to be enormously long, would require as much material to build as the pyramid itself. This is where the construction methods likely evolved and adapted. Higher courses may have used internal ramps, built within the pyramid's structure itself, or spiraling ramps that wrapped around the pyramid's exterior, allowing continued access to the working height without the need for ever longer straight ramps extending into the desert. Archaeological remains support the idea that multiple ramp techniques were used, adapted to different stages of construction and different logistical challenges. Near the pyramids and other ancient Egyptian construction sites, archaeologists have found remnants of ramps, compacted rubble and brick, sometimes still showing the tracks where sledges were dragged, sometimes preserving post holes where wooden supports once stood. These fragments suggest a variety of approaches, a flexibility of method that speaks to the intelligence and adaptability of the ancient engineers. The truth is likely that the pyramid's construction was not accomplished by a single technique, but by many techniques applied thoughtfully as circumstances required. The builders were problem solvers, constantly adapting, constantly refining their methods. When one approach reached its limit, they devised another. When a new challenge arose, they met it with ingenuity. The pyramid is not just a monument to the power of pharaohs or the labor of workers, it is a monument to human creativity, to our ability to envision something that has never been and then to make it real through patience, through planning, through the application of practical wisdom. As you drift deeper into rest, let your mind hold the image of those ancient workers, not slaves toiling under the lash, as old myths suggested, but skilled laborers, craftsmen, engineers, problem solvers. Let yourself see the ramps rising beside the growing pyramid, the sledges moving steadily upward, the levers carefully positioning each stone, the overseers checking alignment and level, the constant adjustment and refinement that turned vision into reality, stone by stone, day by day, until the impossible stood complete beneath the Egyptian sun. Rest now in the knowledge that great things are built slowly, carefully, with attention to detail and patience for the long work. The pyramid did not rise in a day, but it rose. And it stands still. As the quiet hours of the night enfold you, let us turn our attention away from the stone itself and toward the people who shaped it, the thousands of human beings whose hands, backs, and minds brought the Great Pyramid into existence. For many years, a persistent myth has clouded our understanding of how the pyramids were built. Popular imagination often conjured images of endless lines of slaves, whipped and driven, suffering under brutal conditions to satisfy a tyrant's ego. But archaeology tells a very different story, one far more complex and, in many ways, far more remarkable. The pyramid was built by paid, organized workers, not slaves. These were people who came to Giza as part of a national project, as participants in something that transcended their individual lives, as contributors to a monument that would connect Egypt to eternity. At any given time during the peak construction years, around 20,000 laborers worked at the pyramid site. 20,000 people. Imagine a small city dedicated entirely to a single purpose, a community organized around the transformation of stone into immortality. These workers were not randomly gathered crowds, but carefully organized teams, each with specific roles, specific skills, specific responsibilities in the grand design. These workers didn't simply appear each morning from nowhere and vanish each evening. They lived nearby, in a planned settlement that archaeologists have excavated and studied, a place called Hayt el Gharab. This workers' city was itself a marvel of organization, a community created from nothing to house and support the pyramid builders. The settlement included homes where workers lived, barracks for those on temporary rotation from other parts of Egypt, bakeries that produced the bread that was a staple of the Egyptian diet, and breweries that produced beer, which was not just refreshment but an important source of nutrition and calories for people engaged in heavy labor. The layout of Hayt el Gharab reveals careful planning. Streets ran in organized patterns. Storage facilities held grain and other supplies. There were workshops where tools were made and repaired. There were administrative buildings where records were kept, records of deliveries, of work assignments, of rations distributed. This was not a haphazard camp, but a functioning city, a machine designed to support the even larger machine of pyramid construction. The workers themselves were organized into rotating teams known as philes, a Greek word that archaeologists have adopted to describe these work divisions. Each phyle consisted of roughly 2,000 men, and these were further divided into smaller crews of about 200 workers each. This hierarchical organization allowed for efficient management of the massive workforce. Teams could be rotated in and out, so that no single group bore the burden continuously. Farmers from the provinces might serve their time at Giza during the inundation season, when their fields were underwater and there was no agricultural work to be done, then return home for planting and harvest. These crews took pride in their work and gave themselves names that have survived because workers inscribed them on blocks deep within the pyramid, marks that were never meant to be seen by anyone once the construction was complete. Team names included titles like Friends of Khufu, the Drunkards of Menkaure, the Followers of the Powerful White Crown. These names speak of camaraderie, of group identity, of a sense of belonging to something larger than oneself. They suggest competition between teams, pride in workmanship, the human tendency to create meaning and fellowship even in the midst of difficult labor. Within this organized workforce, different people had different roles based on their skills and expertise. The heavy hauling of stones required physical strength and endurance, but it didn't require extensive training. These positions could be filled by farmers and general laborers. But skilled artisans handled the more specialized tasks, stone cutting with precision, surveying to ensure the pyramid's alignment and level, the intricate fitting of casing stones that had to meet nearly seamlessly. These craftsmen had trained for years to master their trades. They could read the stone, understanding where it would split cleanly, where it might crack, how to shape it to exact specifications. They could use measuring tools and plumb bobs and water levels to ensure accuracy across vast distances. And then there were the administrators, the scribes and overseers who managed the immense logistics of the project. They tracked deliveries of food from estates throughout Egypt, ensuring that 20,000 workers and their families had enough to eat every day. They managed tools, recording their distribution and return, repairing or replacing copper chisels that wore down with use. They created work schedules, determining which teams would work where and when, coordinating the delivery of stones from quarries to match the pace of construction. They kept records on papyrus and pottery shards, documenting the daily operations of one of history's most ambitious projects. Inside the pyramid itself, in those hidden relieving chambers that we spoke of earlier, workers left their marks. Graffiti written in red ochre records crew names and workdays, brief notations like Year 17 of Khufu's reign, or the gang of the boat crew, or simply the name of a work team accompanied by a date. These inscriptions are remarkably casual, the ancient equivalent of signing your work, of leaving evidence that you were here, that you contributed, that you mattered. They humanize the entire enterprise, reminding us that behind every block were individuals with names, with identities, with lives beyond their labor. The Pyramid Project was a massive state-run effort, perhaps the most ambitious organizational undertaking of the ancient world. The pharaoh's administration coordinated resources from across Egypt. Temples and estates sent portions of their agricultural production to feed the workers. Copper for tools came from mines in Sinai. Stone came from quarries at multiple locations. Timber, scarce in Egypt, was imported from Lebanon. Ships moved constantly up and down the Nile, carrying supplies and materials. Messengers traveled between Giza and administrative centers, carrying reports and instructions. This level of organization required more than just authoritarian command. It required logistical genius, bureaucratic efficiency, and most importantly, it required the willing participation of the Egyptian people. Yes, the workers were paid, in food, in beer, in goods, but they were also motivated by belief. They believed in their pharaoh as a divine intermediary, a living god whose death and proper burial mattered for the cosmic order. They believed that by contributing to his eternal monument, they were participating in something sacred, ensuring Ma'at, the Egyptian concept of balance, order, and justice that kept chaos at bay. Recent archaeological work has revealed something else about these workers: they were cared for. Skeletal remains found in workers' cemeteries near the pyramids show evidence of medical treatment. Broken bones had been set and healed. People who suffered injuries were treated and recovered, rather than being simply discarded. This suggests a society that valued its workers, that invested in their well-being, that recognized them as essential rather than expendable. The pyramid was not built by nameless, faceless masses, but by communities of real people, people who shared meals, who gave their work crews colorful names, who competed with friendly rivalry to see whose team could work faster, who felt pride when a difficult block was perfectly positioned, who returned home with stories of having worked on the greatest building project Egypt had ever attempted. Their individual names are mostly lost to us now, but their collective achievement remains, towering over the desert, a testament to what organized human effort can accomplish. As you settle more deeply into rest, think of them, the stone cutters squinting against granite dust, the surveyors checking their levels one more time, the rope handlers whose palms grew calloused from pulling, the bakers rising before dawn to feed thousands, the scribes carefully recording the day's work by lamplight. They lived and worked and returned to dust thousands of years ago, but the monument they built together still stands, still speaks, still connects us to their dedication and skill. Let their ancient labor lull you toward sleep, the rhythm of their work like a heartbeat from the distant past, steady, patient, enduring. Rest now, as they have rested these many centuries, their task complete, their legacy eternal. As the night deepens and the world grows quieter still, let us imagine what it was like to live and work on the Giza Plateau during those years of construction, the rhythm of days, the texture of ordinary life in the shadow of extraordinary achievement. Workers rose before dawn each day, stirring in the half-light before the sun broke over the eastern desert. The mornings were the coolest hours, precious time before the full weight of the Egyptian sun bore down upon the plateau. In the workers' settlement, the sounds of waking would ripple through the barracks and homes, quiet conversations, the splash of water for washing, the shuffle of feet on packed earth, thousands of people beginning their day with the same purpose. Breakfast was a simple affair, but essential fuel for the work ahead. Workers typically ate bread and drank beer, staples of the Egyptian diet that provided both sustenance and energy. The bread was dense and hearty, made from emmer wheat or barley, often baked in large communal ovens that heated the morning air even further. It might be eaten plain, or dipped in oil, or accompanied by onions or dried fish when available. And the beer, this was not the beverage we might imagine today, but something thicker, more nutritious, with a low alcohol content. Beer was safer to drink than untreated water from the Nile or from wells, because the brewing process killed harmful organisms that might cause illness. In a time before modern sanitation, before understanding of bacteria and waterborne disease, the ancient Egyptians had discovered through trial and experience that beer kept people healthier than water alone. It provided calories, it provided hydration, and it provided a small measure of comfort and normalcy. Workers received their rations of bread and beer regularly. It was part of their compensation, as essential as any payment. After this early meal, as the sun climbed higher, the work began in earnest. Labor continued through intense desert heat that could reach well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer months. The sun beat down on the pale limestone, on the sand, on the backs of workers hauling stone and climbing ramps and positioning blocks. There was little shade on the pyramid's flanks, little relief from the relentless light and heat. The work was physically demanding under any circumstances, but in such heat it became a test of endurance. The ancient Egyptians were not foolish about this. They understood the dangers of working through the hottest hours, understood that exhausted workers made mistakes, that heat could fell even the strongest man. So work slowed during midday, the most brutal hours when the sun stood directly overhead. Workers would retreat to whatever shade they could find, perhaps temporary awnings erected near the work site, perhaps back to the settlement where buildings provided cooler interiors. They would rest, conserve their strength, drink more beer, wait for the afternoon when the sun would begin its descent and the temperature would ease slightly. The timing of the pyramid's construction was closely tied to the rhythm of the Nile itself. Most of the major labor occurred during the Nile flood season, that annual miracle when the river swelled with waters from distant mountains, spreading life-giving silt across Egypt's farmlands. This inundation typically lasted from June through September, and during these months, farming was largely impossible. The fields lay underwater, waiting for the flood to recede and deposit its gift of fertile mud. This created a perfect opportunity for the pyramid project. Farmers from throughout Egypt would join the workforce as seasonal workers when their fields were submerged and there was no agricultural work to be done. They would travel to Giza, some from nearby regions, others from far up or down the Nile, bringing with them their strength and their labor. They would work for weeks or months, fulfilling their obligation to the pharaoh, earning their rations, contributing to the national project. Then, when the waters receded and it was time for planting, they would return home to their villages and farms, replaced by other rotating crews. This system was ingenious. It mobilized a huge workforce precisely when they were available. It distributed the burden across the entire population rather than placing it on a permanent laboring class, and it meant the pyramid project didn't compete with the essential work of agriculture that sustained Egypt. It transformed seasonal unemployment into productive contribution, and it connected people from all over Egypt to the pyramid, making it truly a national monument rather than just the pharaoh's tomb. But the work, however well organized, was dangerous. Stone is unforgiving. Ropes could break. Sledges could shift unexpectedly. Workers could fall from heights or be struck by falling blocks or simply strain their bodies beyond what they could bear. Injuries were common: broken bones, crushed fingers, pulled muscles, cuts and abrasions. The dust from cutting and shaping limestone could damage lungs over time. The physical toll was real. And yet, these workers received medical care. Archaeologists have examined skeletal remains from workers' cemeteries near the pyramids, and what they've found is revealing. Broken bones show evidence of proper treatment, fractures that were set, aligned correctly, then healed. This takes skill, knowledge of anatomy, and importantly, it takes time. A worker with a broken leg cannot simply be sent away and forgotten. Someone has to set the bone, immobilize it, provide care during the weeks of healing, continue to feed the injured person even though they cannot work. These healed fractures show us something profound about how workers were valued and cared for. They were not disposable. They were not worked until they broke and then discarded. They were skilled members of a community, and when they were injured in service to the pyramid, they were tended to, allowed to heal, and presumably returned to work when they were able. Some injuries were severe enough that workers would have been permanently disabled, unable to continue the heavy labor they once performed, yet even these individuals appear to have been cared for and sustained. The fact that medical practitioners were present, that they had the knowledge and supplies to treat injuries, that the system made provision for the wounded, all of this speaks to a level of social organization and humane consideration that challenges our assumptions about ancient labor practices. These were not expendable bodies, but valued people whose well-being mattered to the community and to the success of the project. When workers died, whether from accidents, from illness, or simply from the natural end of their years, many were buried near the pyramids they had helped to build. The workers' cemeteries cluster around the pyramid complex, modest tombs compared to the grand monuments of the royalty, but still carefully prepared, still oriented according to religious beliefs, still provisioned with the goods the deceased might need in the afterlife. To be buried near the pyramid was an honor, a way of remaining connected to the great work even in death. These burials tell us that the workers and their families believed in what they were doing. They weren't just laboring for pay, though the pay mattered. They weren't just fulfilling an obligation, though duty played a role. They were participating in something sacred, something that would endure, something that connected them to the divine order of Egypt itself. To rest eternally near the pyramid was to remain part of that achievement forever. As you drift toward sleep, imagine an evening on the Giza plateau after a long day of work. The sun has set behind the western desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The work has stopped for the day. Workers make their way back to the settlement, tired but satisfied, comparing the day's progress, joking with friends, thinking about the evening meal. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Children play in the dusty streets between buildings. Someone starts a song and others join in. The pyramid rises in silhouette against the darkening sky, each day's work visible in its growing height. The stars begin to appear, the same stars the ancient Egyptians navigated by, the same stars they believed were the souls of the departed. The plateau grows quiet except for the murmur of voices, the occasional bark of a dog, the rustle of the evening breeze. Tomorrow will bring another day of work, more stones to move, more courses to lay, but tonight there is rest, there is community, there is the simple satisfaction of having contributed to something greater than oneself. Rest now as those workers rested, your day's labor complete, your body easing into stillness, your mind drifting gently toward sleep. Let the ancient rhythms carry you, the rising and setting of the sun, the flow of the river, the steady accumulation of stone upon stone, day after day, until the impossible becomes real. As the night settles into its deepest stillness, let us turn our thoughts to the beliefs that made the pyramid necessary, the intricate web of symbolism and faith that transformed stone into something far more than architecture. The pyramid symbolized the primeval mound of creation, that first piece of solid earth that emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. According to Egyptian creation mythology, before there was land or sky, before there were gods or people, there existed only none, the infinite, dark waters of potential. From these waters rose the first mound, the Ben, and upon this mound the Creator God stood to bring forth all existence. Every pyramid echoed this sacred moment, recreating in stone that first emergence of order from chaos, that first victory of existence over nothingness. The pyramid's shape itself held profound meaning. Its sloping sides, rising to a point, echoed the rays of the sun god Ra streaming down from heaven to earth. If you've ever seen sunlight breaking through clouds, those brilliant shafts of light descending at an angle, that is what the ancient Egyptians saw in the pyramid's form. The structure was a stairway of sunlight made solid, a divine pathway between the earthly and celestial realms, connecting the pharaoh's tomb to the source of all life and light. At the heart of all this symbolism lay a fundamental belief that defined ancient Egyptian civilization: pharaohs were believed to become gods after death. During life, the pharaoh was already divine, the living embodiment of Horus, the son of the gods. But death was not an ending for the pharaoh, it was a transformation, a return to the company of the gods, emerging with the eternal divine powers that sustained the universe. The pharaoh would join Ra in his solar bark, sailing across the sky each day and through the underworld each night. The pharaoh would become one with Osiris, the god of the dead and of resurrection, ruling over the realm of the afterlife. For this transformation to occur successfully, everything had to be done correctly. The body had to be preserved through mummification. The proper rituals had to be performed. The tomb had to be equipped with everything the pharaoh's spirit might need. And the tomb itself, the pyramid, had to function as a kind of resurrection machine, a perfectly calibrated instrument designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey from death to divine life. This is why every element of the pyramid's design carried meaning, why precision mattered so much, why nothing was left to chance. The pyramid wasn't just housing a body, it was launching a soul into eternity, ensuring the continued existence of divine kingship, maintaining the cosmic order that kept chaos at bay. The stakes, in the minds of the builders and priests and the pharaoh himself, could not have been higher. Within the pyramid's structure, features existed that reveal the depth of this astronomical and spiritual thinking. Narrow shafts extended from the chambers toward specific stars, passages barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, too small to serve any practical function for the living, but perfectly sized for the pharaoh's Ka, his spiritual essence, to travel along. The southern shafts, extending from both the king's chamber and the queen's chamber, were aligned with particular precision toward Orion's belt, that distinctive line of 3 stars that dominates the winter sky. To the Egyptians, Orion was associated with Osiris himself. The constellation's annual disappearance below the horizon and its eventual return mirrored the death and resurrection of Osiris, and by extension, promised the same cycle of renewal for the pharaoh. When the pharaoh's spirit traveled through the southern shaft, it would journey toward Osiris, toward the possibility of rebirth and eternal life. The northern shafts told a different story, aligned with the circumpolar stars, those constellations that wheel around the celestial North Pole without ever setting below the horizon. Night after night, year after year, century after century, these stars remain visible, eternally circling but never disappearing. To the ancient Egyptians, these were the imperishable ones, the indestructible stars, symbols of eternal life itself. By aligning the northern shafts toward these stars that never set, the pyramid connected the pharaoh's tomb to the very concept of immortality. The pharaoh's spirit could ascend through these passages and join the imperishable stars, becoming eternal like them, circling forever in the night sky, never dying, never fading, never ceasing to exist. These stars represented the most permanent, most reliable feature of the heavens, and the pharaoh would become one with them. The precision required to align these shafts correctly is remarkable. They had to be angled just right, had to point with accuracy toward their celestial targets despite being carved deep within the pyramid's mass. The builders couldn't simply look through the shaft from inside to check the alignment. The shafts were too narrow, too long, often blocked during construction. The alignment had to be calculated mathematically and astronomically, planned before the shaft was even begun, maintained carefully as each block was laid and each segment of the shaft was carved. But the pyramid complex held more mysteries, more provisions for the pharaoh's afterlife journey. 2 solar boat pits were buried beside the pyramid, carefully sealed chambers carved into the bedrock and roofed with massive stone blocks. In 1954, Egyptian archaeologist Kamal el-Malik discovered one of these pits, and when it was opened after more than 4,500 years, it contained a complete boat, disassembled but perfectly preserved, its cedar wood still fragrant, its ropes and matting intact. This boat was enormous, more than 140 feet long, with elegant curved lines and careful craftsmanship. It had never touched water, had never been sailed. It was built for a different purpose entirely. These boats represented the king's journey through the heavens, the vessel in which the pharaoh would accompany Ra, the sun god, on his daily voyage across the sky. In Egyptian belief, the sun's movement wasn't automatic or guaranteed. Each day, Ra sailed his solar bark across the heavens from east to west, bringing light and life to the world. Each night, he traveled through the duat, the underworld, facing dangers and chaos serpents, battling to ensure he would rise again at dawn. This was the fundamental cycle of existence, the sun's death each evening and resurrection each morning, endlessly repeated, maintaining the rhythm of creation itself. The pharaoh, after death, would join this journey. He would become a crew member on Ra's solar bark, helping to fight off the enemies of the sun, participating in the eternal battle against chaos, ensuring that the sun would continue to rise, that life would continue, that Ma'at, order and balance, would be preserved. The boats buried beside the pyramid were the pharaoh's contribution to this journey, his vessels for traversing the sky, his transportation through eternity. One boat for the day journey, one for the night, or perhaps one for traveling north, one for traveling south, mirroring the flow of the Nile and the movement of the sun. The exact symbolism may have been more complex than we can now fully understand, layered with meanings that made perfect sense to the ancient priests and theologians but which have become obscured by time. What remains clear is the totality of the vision. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb, but a complete system for ensuring the pharaoh's successful transition to divine existence. Every element worked together, the mummified body preserved in its sarcophagus, the shafts aligned to stars, the boats ready for celestial navigation, the prayers inscribed on walls, the offerings made in temples, the rituals performed by priests who would continue their service for generations after the pharaoh's death. As you rest in these quiet hours, let yourself sense the depth of belief that animated all of this effort. For the ancient Egyptians, these weren't metaphors or symbols in our modern sense, they were reality. The stars truly were divine beings. The sun truly died each night and was reborn each dawn. The pharaoh truly would transform into a god. The pyramid truly was a machine for resurrection, each stone a component in a device designed to cheat death itself. Their certainty, their faith, was so complete that they built in stone, invested decades of labor, organized their entire society around making it real. And in a way, they succeeded, not in the literal resurrection they envisioned, perhaps, but in creating something that has outlasted empires, that still speaks to us across the vast gulf of time, that still inspires awe and wonder, that still connects us to human beings who died thousands of years ago but whose beliefs and hopes and dreams were preserved in the eternal stone they left behind. Rest now, beneath the same stars the pharaohs watched, under the same moon that lit the plateau while the pyramid rose. Let the ancient faith in transformation and renewal carry you gently into sleep, where your own dreams can touch, for a moment, that eternal realm the Egyptians believed in so deeply, a place beyond time, beyond death, where the spirit sails forever among the stars. As the night continues its gentle passage, let us follow the pyramid forward through time, beyond the pharaoh's burial, beyond the age of its builders, into the long centuries of change and rediscovery. The pyramid remained sealed for centuries after construction, its passages blocked with granite plugs, its entrance concealed, its interior silent and dark. For generations, priests maintained the mortuary cult, making offerings at the temples, performing rituals to sustain the pharaoh's spirit in the afterlife. The pyramid stood as it was meant to stand, inviolate, eternal, a closed system protecting its sacred purpose. But time is patient and relentless, and even the most carefully constructed monuments cannot resist its effects forever. Over the centuries and millennia that followed, earthquakes shook the Giza plateau. Egypt sits near the boundary of tectonic plates, and while major earthquakes are rare, they do occur. Each tremor, each shift of the earth beneath the pyramid's foundation, loosened stones ever so slightly. The precise fitting that had made the casing stones nearly seamless began to fail. Blocks shifted by mere fractions of an inch at first, but those small movements accumulated over time. The truly devastating blow came much later, during the medieval period, when Cairo was growing into a major city and builders needed vast quantities of quality stone. The pyramids, standing conveniently nearby and already partially damaged by time and earthquakes, became a ready-made quarry. Medieval builders removed casing stones systematically, transporting them across the river to construct mosques, fortifications, and buildings in Cairo. The fine white limestone from Tura, which had given the pyramid its smooth, gleaming surface, was stripped away block by block, revealing the rougher core masonry beneath. This process continued for centuries. Whenever a major building project required stone, workers would return to the pyramids and remove more casing blocks. It must have seemed inexhaustible, millions of tons of already cut stone, requiring no quarrying, only the labor of transport. The builders who took these stones likely gave little thought to what they were dismantling. To them, the pyramids were ancient ruins from a civilization that no longer existed, a resource to be used rather than a heritage to be preserved. The result of this sustained removal was dramatic. The pyramid's smooth surface became rough and stepped, each course of core blocks visible like a giant stairway. The brilliant white sheen that once made the pyramid visible for miles disappeared, replaced by the weathered yellow-brown of limestone exposed to the elements. The sharp geometric perfection of the slopes became irregular, almost organic in appearance, as if the desert itself were reclaiming the structure stone by stone. In this transformation, the original entrance was forgotten. The pyramid had been sealed so effectively, its entrance concealed so well, that as centuries passed and the priesthood that maintained it faded away, knowledge of how to enter the structure was lost. The pyramid became a mystery, clearly artificial, clearly significant, but locked, silent, impenetrable. This changed in the 9th century, during the reign of Caliph al-Ma'mun, an Abbasid ruler known for his interest in science and learning. Driven by curiosity and perhaps by rumors of treasure hidden within, Al-Ma'mun ordered his workers to force their way into the pyramid. Since the true entrance was unknown, they simply chose a spot on the north face and began tunneling inward, boring through solid limestone with hammers and chisels, heating the rock with fires and then dousing it with cold vinegar to crack it, working their way slowly into the pyramid's mass. They tunneled for more than 100 feet through solid stone, a brutal and exhausting process, before finally breaking through into the descending passage. From there, they were able to explore the interior, discovering the ascending passage, the Grand Gallery, and eventually the King's Chamber. The tunnel Al-Ma'mun's workers created, rough, irregular, showing the marks of desperate labor, is now the main entrance used by tourists. The original, more elegant entrance, higher up on the face, was eventually rediscovered, but Al-Ma'mun's forced entry remains the primary access point. Long before Al-Ma'mun, though, the pyramids had captured the imagination of travelers and historians. Ancient Greek historians visited and wrote about the pyramids, which were already ancient by their time. To the Greeks of the classical period, the pyramids were as old as classical Greece is to us, monuments from an inconceivably distant past, built by a civilization that seemed almost mythical in its antiquity and achievements. Herodotus, the Greek historian often called the father of history, visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE and recorded stories of the pyramids' construction. Some of what he wrote was based on what Egyptian priests told him, though after more than 2,000 years, their own knowledge had become mixed with legend. Herodotus reported that 100,000 workers labored for 20 years to build the Great Pyramid, that they worked in 3-month shifts, that Khufu was a cruel tyrant who prostituted his own daughter to raise funds for construction. Modern archaeology has corrected many of Herodotus's claims. We now know the workforce was smaller, the project longer, the pharaoh's character impossible to judge from our distance. But Herodotus preserved something valuable nonetheless, evidence that even in his time, 2,500 years ago, the pyramids were objects of wonder and speculation, monuments so impressive that people felt compelled to explain them, to tell stories about them, to grapple with the question of how such things could exist. Over the following centuries, treasure hunters searched the pyramid for riches. The belief that pharaohs were buried with vast wealth, gold, jewels, precious objects, drew adventurers, thieves, and desperate people willing to risk the curse-laden interior of an ancient tomb for the chance of treasure. They chipped away at walls, looking for hidden chambers. They dug through floors, hoping to find secret vaults. They pried at stones, convinced that behind one particular block must lie the pharaoh's treasure room. But most chambers were already empty when opened. Whether the pyramid was robbed in antiquity, whether the pharaoh's burial was moved to a secret location, whether there was ever treasure in the amounts imagined, remains uncertain. What Al-Ma'mun's workers found when they finally reached the king's chamber was the granite sarcophagus, its lid missing or broken, the interior empty. No mummy. No gold. No treasure. Only stone and darkness and the echo of their own disappointment. This emptiness became its own mystery. Had grave robbers succeeded thousands of years earlier, plundering the pyramid despite all the precautions? Had there been an official removal of the burial, a secret reinterment to protect it from theft? Had the pyramid served some other purpose entirely, been abandoned before the burial took place? Each theory has its proponents, and the truth remains elusive, hidden somewhere in those ancient years when the pyramid was still sealed and its secrets were still intact. What we do know is that by the time serious archaeological investigation began in the 19th and 20th centuries, the pyramid had already survived more than 4,000 years of earthquakes, stone removal, forced entries, and treasure hunting. It had been diminished but not destroyed, damaged but not defeated. It had outlasted the civilization that built it, had watched other civilizations rise and fall around it, had become the last survivor of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only one still standing. As you rest now in these quiet hours, think of the pyramid's long endurance. It has been sealed and breached, pristine and damaged, forgotten and rediscovered, understood and mysterious. It has weathered time itself, that most patient destroyer of all human works. The stones that workers positioned with such care have been shaken by earthquakes, scorched by the desert sun, chilled by night winds, worn by blowing sand, and yet they remain, still recognizable, still massive, still capable of inspiring the same awe they inspired when they were new. The pyramid has outlasted everyone who ever tried to destroy it, everyone who ever doubted it would endure, everyone who ever claimed to understand it completely. It stands as a testament not just to the power of the pharaoh who commissioned it or the skill of the workers who built it, but to the simple fact that some human creations, made with enough care and on a sufficient scale, can approach something like immortality. Rest now, as the pyramid rests, patient and enduring, weathered but unbroken, ancient beyond measure but still present, still real, still waiting beneath the stars for the next sunrise, the next visitor, the next generation to stand before it in wonder and ask, how? Why? And what does it mean that this exists? As the night draws toward its quietest hour, when sleep is deepest and dreams most vivid, let us bring our journey to the present moment, to what modern science has revealed about the Great Pyramid, and to the living legacy it continues to hold in our world today. Radiocarbon dating, that remarkable scientific technique that measures the decay of carbon isotopes in organic material, confirms a construction age of about 4,500 years for the Great Pyramid. Scientists tested fragments of charcoal and organic matter found in the mortar between stones, material from the fires that workers used to light their work, from the plants they mixed into mortar. The results align remarkably well with the historical records, with the reign of Khufu in Egypt's 4th dynasty, giving us confidence that what the ancient texts tell us matches physical reality. The pyramid is as old as the legends claim, perhaps even older than we can truly comprehend. Modern surveys of the pyramid employ technologies the ancient builders could never have imagined. Laser scanning creates 3-dimensional models accurate to within millimeters, mapping every surface, every irregularity, every remaining casing stone. Satellite imaging examines the pyramid from orbit, revealing patterns invisible from ground level, detecting subsurface anomalies through variations in density and temperature. Drones fly intricate patterns around the structure, photographing details too high or too dangerous for human access. Ground-penetrating radar sends waves through stone, searching for voids and chambers that traditional exploration might never find. These technologies have made discoveries that would have been impossible just decades ago. In 2017, an international team using muon tomography, a technique that detects particles called muons that rain down from cosmic rays, revealed a large void above the Grand Gallery. This hidden space, at least 100 feet long, exists within the pyramid's mass, its purpose unknown. Is it a relieving chamber like those above the king's chamber? Is it an undiscovered passage? Could it be a sealed room that has remained untouched since the pyramid was built? The void is there, confirmed by multiple independent scans, but accessing it without damaging the structure presents enormous challenges. The mystery remains, tantalizingly close yet still unreachable. More recently, in 2023, another scanning project discovered a hidden corridor near the north face of the pyramid. This passage, about 30 feet long, was detected through similar non-invasive technology and later confirmed with a tiny camera inserted through a gap between stones. The corridor appears to be another architectural feature related to the pyramid's internal structure, perhaps connected to weight distribution or access during construction. Each new discovery reminds us that despite thousands of years of exploration, the pyramid still holds secrets, still has revelations waiting. Beyond the pyramid itself, archaeologists continue uncovering workers' villages and tombs in the surrounding area. Each season of excavation reveals more about the people who built the pyramid, their homes, their tools, their daily lives, their deaths. Pottery shards tell us what they ate and drank. Seal impressions reveal administrative structures. Skeletal remains provide information about health, nutrition, and the physical toll of the work. The more we dig, the more human the story becomes, the more we understand that behind the monumental achievement were ordinary people living extraordinary lives. The significance of the Giza Plateau to World Heritage was formally recognized when it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. This designation acknowledges that the pyramids belong not just to Egypt, but to all humanity. They are part of our collective story, monuments that transcend national boundaries and speak to universal human capacities for imagination, organization, and creation. The UNESCO designation also brings responsibility for preservation, ensuring that these structures will continue to exist for future generations to study and experience. Millions of visitors travel to Giza each year, drawn from every corner of the globe by the magnetic pull of these ancient monuments. They come to stand where you can stand nowhere else, in the presence of something genuinely ancient, genuinely monumental, genuinely awesome in the original sense of that word. They come to feel small against the pyramid's immensity, to crane their necks looking upward at slopes that seem to rise forever, to place their hands on stones that were positioned before their great-great-great-grandparents' times 100 were born. But this flood of visitors brings its own challenges. Millions of footsteps wear away stone. Breath and humidity from crowds affect the interior chambers, causing salts to crystallize and surfaces to deteriorate. Trash, vandalism, and the simple physical presence of so many people stress the monument in ways the builders never anticipated. Conservation projects work constantly to protect the pyramids from erosion and tourism, a delicate balance between allowing access and ensuring preservation. Conservators monitor humidity levels inside the chambers, regulate the number of visitors allowed inside at any given time, repair damage from past restoration efforts that sometimes did more harm than good, and work to stabilize stones loosened by time and tourist traffic. It's painstaking, often invisible work. When conservation is done well, nothing seems to change, which is precisely the point. The goal is not to restore the pyramid to some imagined original state, but to prevent further deterioration, to hold the line against entropy, to ensure that the pyramid can continue to exist as close to its current state as possible. Among all these facts and figures, one stands out with particular poignancy. The Great Pyramid is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. Of the 7 monuments that ancient travelers considered the most remarkable achievements of human civilization, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, and the Great Pyramid, only one remains standing. The others have fallen to earthquake, fire, war, or simple neglect. Some left barely a trace. Others exist only in fragments displayed in museums. But the Great Pyramid endures, not just surviving but dominating, still the most impressive monument from that ancient list, still capable of inspiring the wonder that earned it its place among the 7. This survival is not accidental. The pyramid endures because of how it was built, the solid mass of its construction, the stability of its shape, the quality of its stone, the precision of its engineering. It endures because of where it was built, on solid bedrock, in a climate that is harsh but stable, in a location that remained culturally significant through changing dynasties and civilizations. And it endures because of what it represents, something so fundamental to human ambition and achievement that generation after generation has chosen to preserve it rather than destroy it, to study it rather than quarry it completely away. After millennia, the Great Pyramid remains a symbol of human ingenuity and mystery. It represents what we can achieve when we organize ourselves toward a common goal, when we apply intelligence and persistence to seemingly impossible challenges, when we build not just for our own lifetimes but for eternity. At the same time, it remains mysterious. We still debate exactly how it was built, still discover new chambers and passages, still find new questions to ask about its purpose and meaning. This combination of the known and unknown, the explained and mysterious, is perhaps the pyramid's greatest gift to us. It shows us that we are capable of astonishing things, that human beings thousands of years ago were as intelligent, creative, and capable as we are today. It humbles us with the reminder that for all our modern technology, we still struggle to fully understand what they accomplished. It connects us across the vast span of history to people who lived and died when the world was young, who looked at the same stars we see, who felt the same sun, who hoped their work would last forever, and who, against all odds, succeeded. As you drift now into the deepest rest of sleep, let the image of the Great Pyramid settle in your mind one final time. See it as it stands today, weathered, stepped, stripped of its gleaming casing, diminished from its original glory but still massive, still present, still real. See it as it was when new, brilliant white, geometrically perfect, crowned with gold, a man-made mountain catching the first light of dawn. See the stars wheeling overhead, the same stars the pharaohs watched, the same constellations that promised immortality. The pyramid stands tonight as it has stood for 4,500 years. It will stand tomorrow, and the day after, and for countless tomorrows to come. It has witnessed the entire span of recorded human history and will likely witness much more. It is ancient beyond ancient, enduring beyond enduring, a bridge between the distant past and the present moment, between the mortal and the eternal, between what was and what will be. Rest now, knowing that some things last. Some things endure. Some things, built with sufficient care and vision and dedication, can touch immortality. The pyramid stands as proof, as promise, as testament. And as you sleep beneath the same sky that shelters it, you are connected to that achievement, part of the long chain of humanity that has looked upon the Great Pyramid and marveled. Let the weight of all that stone, all that time, all that human effort and hope and belief, settle around you like a blanket, heavy with meaning, warm with shared humanity, comforting in its permanence. The ancient stones hold their silence. The stars continue their eternal wheel. And you, in this moment, are part of that long story, connected across millennia to everyone who has ever stood in or before the Great Pyramid of Giza. Sleep well. Rest deeply. Dream of stone and stars, of effort and eternity, of the human capacity to create wonders that outlast empires, that bridge the centuries, that speak across the vast silence of time to tell us, we were here, we built this, we hoped it would last forever, and it has. And so, our story gently comes to a close. You don't need to hold on to anything you've heard. There's nothing to remember, and nothing to think about. If your eyes are already heavy, you can let them rest. If you drift off now, that's exactly as it should be. I'll be here with more gentle stories, whenever you're ready. Good night, and rest well.